Bem-vindos a mais um episódio do leaderview, agora na segunda temporada. E hoje a gente vai falar sobre comunicação e public speaking, um assunto super importante e um dos aspectos mais relevantes dentro do mundo da liderança. Hoje a gente trouxe uma convidada chamada Susie Ashfield. A Susie é inglesa e por isso a entrevista foi conduzida em inglês, mas a gente está disponibilizando no canal do YouTube com legendas em português e também em espanhol. Então não deixe de seguir o canal, aproveite a entrevista. So welcome everyone for this new episode of the Leaderview Season 2. Today, we are going to talk about communication and public speaking. And that's why we have traditionally Patrick and Rodolfo, but also a special guest, Susie Ashfield, who is a specialist in the field of communication and public speaking. Hello, Susie. Where are you doing this from?
I'm in London, West London, where it's dark and grey.
Awesome to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Susie, I would like to start with that. So directly to the point on communication. And as you say, to the point. Why is communication so important? And I know it's super broad, and I also know that you run a business around this. So can you tell a little bit about your business and how you help people and companies in the field of communication, public speaking, and, helping people to express themselves?
Absolutely. I think the best way of describing what I do, and it changes almost on a daily basis, but when somebody sits next to me and they say, well, what do you do? And I say, I'm a public speaking coach. Normally I can guarantee the next question is, well, what's that? And the way I describe it is I make anyone feel better, look better, and sound better about the way they communicate publicly on their own, the way they interact. So that is how I would describe my job in a nutshell. And why I think communication is so important is a really big question. Hopefully the answer is obvious, but I think it is the most important thing we do as humans. It is the way we interact. And what's really strange to me is in business or in the corporate world, we seem to be particularly bad at it, which is a great business model for me. But it seems like in the corporate world, we're still using slightly outdated jargon. The language is still quite technical, quite formal, quite heavy. And then as soon as we're out of the office, we're back to communicating normally and talking to each other like human beings, which is just so much more effective. So my job is to kind of bridge that gap and get people relaxed and talking confidently is the same way they would to a friend, to their colleagues, to their boss, to their managers, their employees. And that really helps with the leadership skills. People who communicate like leaders are able to do that.
Yeah, it is super important because especially right now, we have a lot of people not interacting face to face or with the crowds or whatever. Right now it is Zooming as we are doing right now, but also, calls all the time and conferences. So it is super different from the way it was in the past. And I can imagine that it is something new for you as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when we all started Zooming or Microsoft Teamsing or Google Hangoutsing, everyone panicked a bit because we were suddenly having to put ourselves on screen and we hadn't done this before. And what if they see my laundry in the background? And now, just as we're getting comfortable with all of this, we're going back into the real world. And my clients are calling me because they're terrified again. They've just gotten used to doing things from behind a screen. And now they have to remember what it feels like to talk to people in real life. And it's a whole new level of discomfort, and it's a new level of challenge and a new level of fear. And I think a lot of those fears are very rational. It feels a little bit strange to have to kind of bring that energy to the room and connect with somebody again. And some of it's irrational. Some people, and particularly some of my clients, have really deep kind of fears that are totally weird and abstract about what happens if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, or if I communicate poorly, and they focus on that worst possible outcome. Where in reality, I put it the other day like this: if you stopped driving for 18 months and got back into a car, it wouldn't be like you just forgot how to drive. You might be a bit rusty, but you'd know how to do it. So we're going to get back to where we were. We just have to keep the faith that the muscle memory will kick in.
Susie, do you think there's some there that it's about this comfort zone that we created, being behind a screen somehow, and then it's like you're more exposed in person than you're not behind the screen? Is there something to do with that, do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. It's very much subjective and it varies from client to client, but the clients who are coming to me at the moment are the ones you've just described. They feel so much more comfortable on Zoom. They're kind of safer. If everything goes wrong, they're in their own safe living room and things are going to be okay. Whereas in reality, there is no difference. Everything has totally changed, but there is no difference. When we're communicating online, I feel the biggest change is that everything needs to be shorter and sharper and a lot more concise, because our attention spans go from, they're not very big, but they go from here to here. So we need to just give such high level overviews. So I'm predicting, if I'm going to do my Mystic Meg here thing, you will probably see people coming out of Zoom and talking a lot, perhaps talking excessively. And I think we're all going to have to really work very hard in the corporate world to make sure we are still being quite clear and quite concise and sticking to the point. I think we're going to see a lot of waffling.
Probably.
Yeah. And here in the podcast, you're going to see that there's a lot of references we use and in the episodes in our channels. And we were discussing that very interesting reference in some recent interviews, the Berkshire Hathaway CEO, Warren Buffett. He gave some advice in terms of career, investments, and in personal life. And one thing was that the best investment you can really do is in yourself, training yourself, studying, etc. And one very specific advice was regarding communication. So he said, if you invest in your communication, written, but also really, on public speaking specifically, you can improve your value in the market at least on 50%. I know that you think it is true because that's your business and you really believe in that. But is that important? Can you transform your career really harnessing the power of communication?
Of course, absolutely. And I hadn't seen that clip before you sent it to me. I loved it so much. I posted on LinkedIn. I don't know if you saw, but I thought his point was incredibly valid. To give you an example of that, Cleo, I have clients who are really very intelligent. My clients are generally very intelligent people, and they're very high up in the food chain, as it were. And they could be CEOs, and they could be founders, and often founders or often sort of directors of startups. And you say, okay, great. And you have a little conversation with them and you go, and can you please explain what your product is? And they will talk for 2 minutes. And at the end, you might be the first person in their life who turns around and says to them, I have no idea what your product is, what it does, how it works. Sorry. And that kind of 8-year-old ability that I have to go, well, I don't get it, sorry, it really kind of shows them that because they are so close to their product and their service and they've lived it and breathed it from day one, they can no longer remain objective and describe what it is in a sentence or less. And that's often where I come in. I have to kind of stand there or stand back and drill them and ask them to keep going until I get it. And once I start to get it and they see that I start to get it, then we know we're getting across exactly what it is. But it's incredibly common that people who've come up with products and services or even ideas cannot express in words that an 8-year-old would understand to an external audience what that product is, what it does, or how it works. So that's the gap that I'm bridging. And I think the point that Warren Buffett made was crucial. You cannot be the CEO or the founder or even an expert in your profession unless you can communicate clearly to someone who is totally external to you and what you do, but more importantly, why you do it. And so again, that's where I come in and sit there and I describe my job sometimes as holding the mirror, and that's often all I do. So obviously I find communication hugely important. And I think Warren Buffett definitely had a point. Invest in yourself, talk better to people, and they will engage with you.
Great.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? How many times, and you nailed it, because it's about being so comfortable to what we do that it's intrinsic, right? We know exactly what we do, and we think that by just describing it in the way the jargon or whatever words we think makes zero sense to anybody else. And I've seen that happen many times. And people were extremely successful in their careers, but I think you summarize it very well. Like those 2 minutes could make or break somebody in their first impression, and many times it breaks them because they just forgot how to really explain it to a 4-year-old or 8-year-old of what it is that I do. Yeah,
totally.
That's great.
Yeah, it's such a fundamental skill, and it's still weirdly lacking. And what I found, Patrick, is We are really careful to instill it in graduates. Graduates get it. They're told, they have to play the elevator pitch game. You have to describe who you are, where you're going in an elevator. And so they kind of drill it. And they do the same with products and services because they're young and their friends, they'll get under the pub and they say, what are you doing? I'll tell you what I'm doing. I don't understand it. All right, let me break it down. But it seems like the higher up you get and the more internalized and in your own bubble, the more people just understand your language. So you kind of get lazy about being able to explain it to people, which is why I often feel the higher up you go, the harder people find it to describe their product or their service or what it is that they do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe they wish they would just say, I'm the boss, and that's it, right? Thinking that would do the job, and of course it doesn't. Yeah. And when it comes to communication overall, it's debatable, I know, but some people will debate, and I personally believe that one of the oldest and most effective forms of communication is storytelling, right? We see that from when we were, probably using our first words as humankind to today, TED Talks and all that, it really revolves heavily around storytelling. How do you use that or see that and shed light to storytelling as a tool, as a means of effective communication?
Well, let me get a bit meta here and answer that question with a story, Patrick, because I just think it's really appropriate.
Please, thank you.
We had a client who came to us a few years ago now, and they had created, basically they were a coder by nature, and that's what they did. And they'd created a little algorithm and they'd put it into a sat nav. That satellite navigation device with his specific coding in it, it had a claim to fame that it was now able to get to wherever it was going 60 to 90 seconds faster than any other vehicle on the road at that time, right? Which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot. Right. But this individual had decided to create this product specifically for the emergency services. So keep that in mind. His pitch, if I was to describe it, went a little bit like this. He went straight to technical details, specifications, because he'd been working on this from day one and he knew almost too much about it. So when it came to pitching his product, he would focus on that. He would go, this is the X3 4.0 satellite navigation device that works via a series of satellites from position across UK, the blue chip data technology, which it was way too much. Nobody understood what it did and nobody cared what it did either. So we come in and we go, right, well, what does this product do? And we listen and we listen, we still don't get it, we still don't get it. And I'll ask annoying questions like, how would you describe this to an 8-year-old? And he sort of looked at it and went, well, this product is designed to save lives. That's it. That's what the product does. That's its USP. This gets you to where you're going faster because this product saves lives. So when we've got the why, when we've got the purpose of the product, all we do then is look for case studies, which is the corporate fancy term for storytelling.
Stories.
Yeah. It must have taken us 10 minutes to find a case study or a story that either sold the product or told you why you needed it. And we kind of restructured that. And we redid the pitch. And off the top of my head, it went something like, on the 3rd of April, 2004, Annie Lowe was playing outside her house when she was knocked down by a car. The paramedics that arrived at the scene predicted that had they been there just 1 minute earlier, Annie would have had a 90% chance of survival. Ladies and gentlemen, my product saves lives.
There we go.
And at that point, you can drop the product, drop the microphone and leave the stage, because in less than 30 seconds, everyone understands what your product can do for them. And suddenly people want to buy it. They want to buy into it. So you can see why case studies and storytelling is not just important. It is the best way we have of communicating with each other. And it's not being used enough.
Yeah, and I saw one of your videos was very interesting because I think it was the one about going back to in-person meetings, and you said one of the tips you had was about finding that one thing you want your audience to remember, right? What's that one thing you want people to remember? And I think that is a great example of that. And is that maybe one of the things that makes it so hard? Because the storytelling, when we talk about it, again, we probably grew up, hearing our parents telling us stories in bed or whatever. But why is it so hard for people to use that technique, to use storytelling as part of an effective communication tool?
I love that question, Patrick. I really do. And I'm quite confident on the answer. I'm not a psychologist, but essentially, I think it's nervousness. I think it's a lack of confidence in who we are. It's a little bit of imposter syndrome, so that as soon as people are asked to present or communicate, they panic. And what they do is they go, right, I've been asked to do this for a reason, so I have to justify why I'm here. I have to use this opportunity to prove myself, to tell everybody in that room that I am good at my job, please don't fire me. So that's what they do. And that comes out in terms of credibility proving. They use a presentation as a demonstration of how much knowledge I have of this certain thing, which is so disengaging to the audience, I can tell you, and it's totally focused on the speaker. With all of my clients, what I'm trying to get them to do is the exact opposite. It's not about you and your knowledge. It's about the audience and what they want to hear and how they absorb that information. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you give them a story, not only is it interesting, not only is it the way we're best programmed to absorb information, but it focuses everything entirely on them. Just in the way I did with that satellite navigation device. Look how much I know about this product. Who cares? What can this product do for you? Well, let me tell you a story. That works. So it's not just about this idea that we love stories as children, but I think it comes from this deep sense of not quite knowing totally who we are, feeling a bit anxious about it and going, right, presentation, must keep job.
Yeah,
it's so true. I mean, I'm passionate about this topic, this storytelling topic, and we had a training like a year ago, and I decided to use the knowledge, the brand new knowledge around storytelling with one of our clients. And to be honest, it took me like 3 times the time that I used to have to prepare the presentation, because there was a completely change of mindset in order to, when you're creating the presentation to the client. But I can tell you that the outcome was completely different.
It doesn't surprise me.
So yeah. So Susie, I'm the responsible for the uncomfortable questions in our group here, right?
Excellent.
So I'm gonna play some of them. And shifting gears a little bit, truth to be told, we know that jerks are everywhere, right? They're part of our lives, they're part of our culture, they're part of our workplace, and they have been there for years, right? And they're so present in our lives that some authors had create like several type of content to deal with them, right? There's this guy Robert Sutton, right? So he creates a book. So he wrote a book in an article that he classified the assholes, right, as the certified assholes and the temporary assholes, right? And he gives a lot of tips and a lot of strategy on how to deal with these guys. And we've been discussing among us here, for a number of times how to deal with them, right? And how to get outcomes whenever you have to work with them, whenever you have to interact with them, right? Mm. What can you tell us about, how communication, how these, communication strategy can help to extract some outcomes whenever you have to deal with this type of people?
I like that a lot. And I think you're absolutely right. Into every life, a little asshole must fall. What I would say is accept that. That is crucial, that you accept that there are probably more than 5 different types of asshole, and you've probably got maybe 5 of them sat in your audience. However, make sure the mindset is correct. The majority of the audience are on your side. I promise you, 100%. The majority of the audience are on your side. The rest of the audience are probably not that fussed. They're probably thinking about lunch, or what time should I pick the kids up from school, or should I text my wife or husband right now? That is what is going through the mindset, the mind space of your audience. The rest of them are on your side. And yes, every now and then you are going to get an asshole in the audience. But if you go in with a mindset of all of the audience are assholes, then you are going to feel really, really horrible about delivering the speech. Nobody is sat there going, come on, Susie, deliver. If this isn't the best presentation I've seen in my life, I'm going to speak to HR tomorrow. Realistically, nobody thinks like that. Nobody has ever really taken their CEO or their director to HR the next day because they didn't get what they wanted to from the talk or the presentation. you're going to get a few people who stick their hands up and want a little bit of the limelight on them. And I can tell you, I have given a lot of talks, a lot of speeches, and I have met them. I can probably name all 5 types of asshole. And, later, if you stay listening to me, I can give you their email addresses as well, because they like to email me if they're particularly against what I have to say. And I have had some people who, despite a relatively surfacey message, are so against what I have to say. I think they've had a bad day or a bad childhood or something like that. But the thing is, it's not really anything to do with me. Remember that your audience, your asshole, is entitled to opinion. They don't have to like you. That's crucial. And the moment that I realized that, I suddenly felt a lot older. I started doing this quite young, and I was worried that somebody was going to kind of take off the mask and go, oh my God, she doesn't know anything about anything. She's only in her 20s. I'm not in my 20s anymore, thankfully. But I was worried that would happen. And at the moment I realized that it's okay for there to be an asshole, most people are on your side. And if the asshole is going to be an asshole, let them. It's nothing to do with you. They might not like what you have to say. So what? That was a big moment of growing up and a big moment of being mature. And there are little tips and tricks I can give you, but let them have their 5 minutes. Let them talk. If they want to discredit you, if they want to keep talking, go for it. They're allowed to. You are going to look insecure if you start to fight back. Let them do their asshole thing is my best tip.
That's great. That's great. And one of the another question that just came to me, it's about those tips, those strategies, or those techniques that you use in a situation like that. Do you think that it works for, sometime that you have to go to a meeting or to engage with someone that you just don't know, right? But you go with a clear objective, right? You have an objective, and suddenly, the person in the other side of the table is an asshole, right? So you have to deal with that. You have to pursue your objective. You have to go outside of that meeting with this outcome. Do you think that do you think that those techniques works in situations like that too?
Absolutely. And firstly, what I would say is be aware of the definition we're using for asshole, right? An asshole is not just someone who disagrees with you. And some people can disagree with you in the wrong way. Culturally, there could be clashes, right? I've worked with a Japanese company, an Italian company who were trying to do a contract together. Culturally, you cannot get further apart on that scale. No one was being an asshole in that situation. The communication just wasn't working. When I think we talk about assholes, we are talking about somebody who is challenging for the sake of challenging, or being an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. So that's the definition I'm working with here.
There's this, I'm sorry, just to interrupt you, but there's this definition that I like, which is the person who's deliberately trying to maintain a hostile work environment.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's go with that definition. I think that's useful. Go in with your objective. And it's almost like in communication, I say in the video you watched, it was always go in with your headline. What is my one message here and how do I get that across? Same thing with meetings. What is my objective here? And I need to kind of block out the white noise of what you're trying to do and the emotional disruption that you're trying to cause. And I just need to bring you back to this one thing that I need to get from this meeting, or this one thing that I need to get across in this meeting. The trick that I introduced, I would carry on using, but I would take it almost to another layer. Assholes are sometimes tricky to spot, because they'll use passive aggressive language. And that to me is very interesting. And I heard somebody say, it was a client said to me the other day, this person said this to me. And actually that was a very thinly veiled attack. And I didn't know what to do. So I just backed away. It's easy. You just ask them to explain what they mean. You do the 8-year-old thing, right? It's so, let me think of somebody, and it's not like you're too young to do this, or should a girl really be telling a man how to be a CEO? You just go, what do you mean? I don't understand. Can you clarify? Get them to over explain. Give them full space to be an asshole and watch the rest of the audience go, oh wow, you're an asshole.
I like that a lot. I liked it a lot.
That works 100% of the time.
100%.
At least in my experience, it's amazing. You just have to keep them talking.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
then they will feel that, being hostile is just one of the ways that they use normally. And but if you keep them talking about it, the environment will judge them, so they normally back off, a little bit at least. I think it works a lot. It's a very good one.
Yeah, and I think lately we're talking a lot about this concept of mini aggression, right? That it's like it's come more to light now, that you think that something would be just okay to say or to comment, but actually, if you really peel that onion, if you really look under the hood of that car, you see that's kind of a mini aggression, the passive aggressiveness or whatever other form they use to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Because, well, in this case, the group here, Susie, we are also movie buffs. So we really like movies. And sometimes we do episodes talking about the movies and the lessons and the learnings we can take from movies. And this is super great. And you, as a British, you probably remember a movie called The King's Speech, which is something that is so present for us and reminds me that the lessons and the challenges. So I know it is a movie, but I think a lot from that is in terms of not only problems or challenges to speak in public, but fear and other things, like more than fear of spiders, snakes, or we have people and we see people with these extreme challenges to speak in public. Do you deal with those type of things as well? What is can you tell us the biggest challenge you had with a company and also maybe a person in your career, just for us to understand, what are the extremes in this type of business?
There are extremes, and I love that film, and that film was inspirational. And Lionel Logue, the main character, is a king to me. And the definition that I
literally,
literally.
Literally.
Sometimes when people still don't understand what I do, I say, well, have you seen the film The King's Speech? That's what I do. So it's a great way of explaining my job as well. He was good because he was different. Now, there are a lot of fantastic speech therapists out there, but I need to be very clear. My job is very different to the work that a speech therapist does. That's for somebody who's had a stroke or has some kind of physical impairment that stops them speaking. Logue was an actor, but he was also the first person to realize every piece of communication is psychological. It is linked to a fear or a concern, or there is something going on up here that is preventing us from saying exactly what we want to say or be who we want to be. Or there's a good, I think it's a Groucho Marx joke. It's something like it's not even a joke. It's actually a statistic. And it's the number one phobia in the world is public speaking. The number two phobia in the world is death. And the joke, therefore, is if you find yourself saying, I would rather die than do this presentation, then statistically, that is absolutely correct. You would. So that's what I'm facing with. And honestly, I probably worked that out very early on in my career, and I wasn't ready for it at all. It totally blindsided me. So what I did was I looked at sort of how I could help my clients with that. And I got qualified as a coach. And it was just a really useful way of sitting back and getting my clients to talk to me about their fears. What was it they were frightened of? And as soon as they started to talk about those fears and dust them off and get them out in the open, the more they realized that they were irrational, that they're normal for sure, but they're irrational. A common fear, for example, is, what if I go bright red? Okay, so what? So what if you go bright red? Well, if I go bright red, people in the room will see me go bright red. Okay, so what if people see you go bright red? Well, if they see me go bright red, they'll know I'm nervous. Yeah, and if they know you're nervous, they might, that's fine. Well, if they know I'm nervous, they might think I'm bad at my job, and I might be pulled into HR on Monday, and I might lose my job, and I might lose the mortgage on the house, and my wife will leave me, and she'll take the kids and the dog, and suddenly you tap into it. And the more they kind of dig that out and put it in front of you, the more you go, can you hear this? Is it realistic? What evidence do you have to back up these thoughts that is a realistic thought process? So the answer to your question is, I get that sort of client a lot, and they are, without a shadow of a doubt, the most rewarding client I work with. I have clients who come to me and go, you're not going to be able to help. but thank you for trying. HR have sent me away. I am physically sick before every presentation I give. And I'm actually thinking of running away and getting a job in the hills, painting clouds, because I cannot cope in the corporate world anymore, because the higher up I go, the more I have to present, the more I hate it. And we just work it through. And we get there and we kind of go, well, what's step one here? It's a whole journey, and I won't kind of bore you to tears with it, but it's a very common client. The coaching qualification hugely helps, but just allowing those clients to kind of vent their fears is incredibly beneficial to them. And it's, like I say, a really rewarding process for me to be part of that.
I can only imagine that, because, and thank you for the explanation, because it shows us, in the audience, that it is not only about techniques or power poses or the words you use or anything else. There is a lot going on. It is not the words you use or when you use or the way you present yourself. It is a lot about what's happening inside, or behind the curtains, let's say. So it is an amazing work. It is super nice to understand that a project like this, and when a person really wants to improve their capabilities in terms of presentation, public speaking, or if it's in a specific presentation or for their lives, you can really go that far. So it's super nice.
Yeah, and I can get that client from throwing up before my next PowerPoint presentation to, I can do this in front of a live audience, and it was fine.
That's great.
I do have a last question from my side, Susie, which is something that I just saw like a couple of days ago, and it was like it was very timely, right? Since we had this conversation scheduled. So what I'd like to discuss with you is about the voice, right? Not the TV show. Okay, the instrument that we use in a daily basis. So I came across this content from a gentleman called Justin Treasure, and he states about the importance of the voice on the communication process. Now, of course, that there's a number of attributes as the volume, the pace, the pitch, and so on, right? He also advocates that the voice is instrumental to a desired outcome of a conversation. So I'd like to hear from you, what's the importance in your viewpoint of the voice in the entire process?
Great question. The voice is an instrument for sure, and it's incredibly useful and incredibly powerful, and it's not a tool I want to underestimate at any point. I use my voice on stuff outside of this. I previously was a voiceover artist, and every now and then I still do little voiceover adverts for stuff like hotels or potatoes, and we have to talk like this, which, as you can hear, is totally out of how I actually speak in real life. But suddenly you want to stay at my hotel. So I get the importance of the voice, is what I'm saying. What I would say is, for my clients, I am not necessarily so concerned with the pitch and the pace and the tone and the quality. I just need you feeling confident enough to use it. So absolutely, I'm going to get you to play around with it. And if I spot anything obvious that's happening, then I'm going to try and intervene. But actually, if I've got someone who just needs to deliver and they're suddenly focusing on, right, so Susie said I need to move my hands, I need to smile, I need to make eye contact, I need to get the energy up, I also need to work on my intonation, I need to make sure it's too much. It's way too much. And I see it when people are overcoached. And you can sometimes see it in politicians when they're just focusing on too many things at once, and they're just drilling the auto cue, and they become very static versions of themselves. I would rather have a leader who had an authentic voice, who swore, who said who did some spoonerisms, said things like, I'm not as think as you drunk I am, who muddled it up, came across totally as themselves and totally fun and totally friendly, than someone who was completely word for word perfect but could be reading the news, because to me that is not authentic or interesting, because I could just watch the news instead. Do you see what I'm saying? So the voice is crucial. It's an incredibly important instrument, but I need you to be you first before we focus on the details of that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, brilliantly. Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's awesome. And Susie, for me to close, what if someone wants to, transform and learn more and work on their skills in terms of communication? How can you help? I know you have the business, and so how can anyone get in touch? How are the contacts for someone to get in touch with you?
Let me plug what I do. I have a company called Speak to Impact, and if you type in Speak to Impact, I'll come up, but to be honest, it's faster just to type in my name, Susie Ashfield, and then follow me on LinkedIn. If you don't have the budget to invest in yourself, LinkedIn is such a useful tool, and I post all sorts of stuff on there, some of it better than others for sure. But as you see, I post little videos all the time, and they're only ever 2 to 3 minutes long. And I really do kind of put what I consider to be good advice in there. So if that's helpful, follow me on LinkedIn or contact me on LinkedIn, and we can go from there. But in terms of the one thing I would suggest anybody looking to improve at this stuff could do, it's as simple as practicing. Put yourself forward for this stuff. Take the pressure off. It doesn't have to be perfect. Average, confidently average is fine. And the more you do it, the better you'll get.
Great, Susie. Well, great. Well, I think I know all of us could spend hours talking to you because it's a topic that's very close to our heart and so important. So I want to, on behalf of the Leaderview and all our audience, really thank you very much for spending time with us and sharing your wisdom with us. And thanks to our audience, those who are watching or listening to us in the second season of the Leaderview. We hope that you have enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. We're definitely looking forward to this season with great conversations just like this one we had with Susie Ashfield. And please, as usual, please leave your comments and your questions on whichever platform you're checking us out, and we'll follow up with you. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you again, Susie, Rodolfo, and Cleo. It was great talking to you.
Thank you.
Gostou? Então inscreva-se no canal do YouTube e siga o podcast nas principais plataformas para não perder novos conteúdos. Deixe suas perguntas ou comentários ou os envie para theleaderview@gmail.com.